Go out into their world. You're not their world. The world is their world. Introduce them to it. Stand back and let them go into it. Let the dialogue begin. They came into this world. You brought them into this world, or somebody brought you into this world. You have one thing in common with your children, that world. Why are you hiding them from it? Let them see all of nature's sides, the good and the bad. Let them point. Don't provide answers, for God's sake. Don't educate them. That's already happening. You don't know what they're going to become. Introduce them to animals without coercion or censorship. Observe what comes out of them naturally. Some kids will be slower. Good. That's meant to be. That's fine. Doesn't matter what the headmaster thinks. Don't let them build a wall. Those kids who fight you, they're doing right most of the time. They divorce you because you're a fool. They don't like what they see. You're in the way. Their rebellion is always good. Crime is not, but rebellion is always good. But we don't want to see that. We want to suppress. So awaken them to those seasons and phases. Let them watch it. Let them see what's going on. Take them out into nature and let them form their own relationship with it. And do what Hegel said ancient man did, what Nietzsche said we all did, with the whole what are you doing with that? You're saying, I'm taking this child back to the beginning of the beginnings. That happened to the whole human race. They can replicate it as you can replicate it. We've talked about that already. They can replicate it. And just stare at it. Untrammeled, unmolested, uncensored. Allow them to develop a one-to-one relationship with inanimate things, not just human beings. That's the secret of all the problems that they're going to inherit. Because as I said, you want to have certainties. You want to root them into certainties. Once you've done that, once you've let them see the miracle of all of nature's sides, aren't they going to naturally be able to compare that without your help to the world that man has created and probably come up with the right conclusions and be then the people who are going to go and fix it for the right? There's your healing. There's your solution. The other thing to emphasize when it comes to children is this thing called discernment. It ties into the thing I've elaborated on before, but we've never got this deep. And that is that one good thing on our side is that evil contains within it the seeds of its own destruction. It has an Achilles heel. There was a Tuesday where somebody else asked me to elaborate it on an interview, and I wouldn't do it because it was, it has to be in context. And I told him, I said, look, it has to be in context. And now we're at that point. The context is that the Achilles heel and the seeds of its own destruction is this simple fact. All things that are evil don't present themselves as evil, do they? Their penchant is to hide. Their penchant is to hide behind a mask. They use the principle of sheep and wolves clothing. But that's the weakness, isn't it? That is the sheep, that is the Achilles heel. Because if you are smart enough to tell the difference between a wolf and a sheep, evil's fucked. And that is it. And the term for that is discernment. And since we kind of don't have it, and the children who are being born right now definitely don't have it, but could have it, discernment provides an important key. And it also is a timely thing, because in 1 or 2 generations, if the discernment is inculcated, and again I emphasize, they already have it. Step out of the way when they say, Mommy, I don't like that person. Oh, but you gotta be nice, smile, the milkman. The child already knows until we get in there and pummel it to death with the social bullshit. Right? So get out of the way, and it will have the discernment, and it'll be a bodily discernment as well as a mental one. And those higher centers will open, and the inner voices will be loud. And in a short generation, by the time they raise their kids with the same principle, evil is starved to death. Evil is literally has malnutrition. Evil withers away on its own from this thing called discernment. And then the 10 children, as the movie Dune and the book Dune shows, those 10 children can train 100. Those 100 train 1,000. Those 1,000 go and train tens of thousands. And evil cannot find a place to act. It packs up, it withers, it goes. The host has realized that it's hosting a parasite. The parasite has no chance of survival. The children are the future. And discernment must be inculcated in them, or at least we get out of the way and let the process happen. And what you can do is simply keep the kids away from those who obscure this ability. I've always said that watching TV can strengthen discernment if you know what you're doing. Although I say for the very young, you probably don't want to have them watch it. But if you watch it with intelligence, you're all right. But once the ability is quelled in the beginning, once you don't awaken it, they never can get it again. Remember, when I was a child, I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye. When I grew, it went away, gone. It was so uncomfortably numb. I turned to look and it was gone. I cannot put my finger on. The child was grown, the dream is gone. That's what he's talking about. The magic slipped away. And then no matter what life hands you as surrogate to that, what does it matter? You've lost the most precious thing. And we're stealing it from the children. Because it's very hard to reawaken again. Better to have a kid who's rude, rebellious, and hostile than a polite ignoramus. Open to evil and even going out and generating evil. R.D. Lang says, without the most thorough and rapid brainwashing, their mind would see through our dirty tricks. Children are not yet fooled, but we turn them into imbeciles like ourselves, with high IQs if possible. Specifically, this devastation is largely the work of violence that has been perpetrated on each of us, and by each of us on ourselves. The usual name that much of this violence goes under is love. The biggest deceit. Realize those children know totally, they have total intelligence. That's what a child is. Their centers of intelligence are wide open. But we drug the hell out of them. Hell, they're even now physically drugging them to crush that natural intelligence, to crush that spirit of rebellion, repressing our voice to secure the false love, right? Never letting them know you turn within, you know. You have to turn within. And also teaching them the fact that there's no external love. It has to be inculcated within, the love within. These are certainties. The child who's going to be the builder of the future, to bring down all this monstrous evil, is the child that you help to awaken discernment and the aesthetic sense. Because what are you doing when you awaken that virtue of virtues? Right? If we turn to the other thing, death, mortality, that morbid thing that children are never meant to know about, but they're smarter than you, they actually do notice and do know about it, but they also notice your evasion. That's where it goes wrong. The other thing to do is to introduce the child to death as early as possibly. Obviously not in a morbid way or an obsessed way and sit and watch the latest Friday the 13th movie. But at times of funeral, at times of passing, animals will die. So you will find that it's natural. Leaves falling, winters, the seasons changing. What just happened with his death? Or showing pictures of the grandparents, well, they're no longer with us. What do you mean they're dead? When you introduce, and do it without invasion, do it without explanation. Let it come from within. Negentropia, let it come from within. You'll be amazed what will happen. Because the child will now be introduced to what? That life terminates in death, that there's finitude, mortality. Right? That winter comes after the summer. And that you will see basically two responses in children. You'll basically see two responses. You will see, let's move to it. I'll come back to these in a minute. Here it is. You will either see the narcissistic, hedonistic reaction. Oh my God, life ends in death. Well, I better have the best life and party on down, you know, with what life I've got. And that's your narcissistic, insane creature that rules the world today. That's the decision, the contract that they've arrived at. The socially programmed automaton, basically, and the hedonistic, narcissistic creature. Or the flowering that I'm talking about. The child that does what Heidegger is asking, what Nietzsche is talking about, flowers the value of values. The value of the existence that it has while it is here. And that child is rooted in the ultimate certainty and is the true human being, the true sapiens sapiens. Because it's introduced to this human finitude. Now, of course, the hedonist version knows that it just can't go rampaging around as a hedonist. So what does it do? We all know. It disguises itself in the camouflage of politics and religion. That's where we find so many of these creatures in those things, because it has to disguise itself. It has to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. So politics and religion and places where they can wield their power and authority, obviously, are knee deep in these people. So the introduction to mortality is absolutely crucial. Jacob Boehme, the ancient alchemist, theologist, he said, "He who dies not before he dies is ruined when he dies." You must visit life and death together, and you must also bring the children into understanding and not morbidly, and then watch who this child is. Watch what they decide with their life. Because that child will either act hedonistically, as I said, or will cultivate this value of values. And those children are the ones who are the true indigos, or whatever you want to call it, who have the power to banish the devils from this earth. These are the philosophical certainties, and your child must be rooted in it, so that it's unwavered by the gales and storms and whatever it might meet when it has to deal then with the Umwelt and Mitwelt. These are the philosophical certainties. What are they? We did not create ourselves. We're not ready-made beings. We start as one thing and we'll develop into something else. We mature biologically and psychologically over time. We learn that we will be different as time passes. Right? The child hears parents speaking about, what life is going to be when they're older. So change is implicit. And then they learn more deeply that death terminates life. That time becomes more serious then, not frivolous. So the relationship with time has changed. That's what this virtue is part of. Your relationship with time has changed. You become serious. Not in a morbid way, but in that seriousness, the center of seriousness. You become open and aware of a lot of things that other people miss. You do notice the pavement under your feet at that time. You do now notice the handle of the door. You are aware of what things are doing when you walk in this state. But of course, we see time in negative terms as a certainty we have no power over. And we react in certain ways, and it's those reactions that are very, very important to watch. I emphasize that. Because this action of introducing into mortality and finitude, as morbid as it sounds in the beginning, initially, is what will happen to limit their evasion during their life. You want to shrink time down to limit evasion. In the early days, once this is inculcated and you don't turn the child away from the questions of death, they will not be as evasive. They will not be as shallow. They will deepen their awareness of the preciousness of life and make every minute count. And they will emphasize being as opposed to just doing. Not that doing is wrong, but the center of gravity, the vision will change. The doing and the being. Remember, deeds of doing are measured by the clock, just as we have to also do them in harmony with other people, and we justify our doing deeds. Basically, what you know as time is a measure of the doing. Being is an activity, if you even want to call it that is completely confined to the moment, to the present. It's not subject to past and future. It's right now. You have to be in this moment, and only in this moment. And therefore, that's another thing that's beyond time. Just as the physical body we analyzed logically is beyond time, subject-object is nucleated, right? Transcended. So, by the act of being, you also are transcending time. Because it is not of the past. You can't be yesterday and be tomorrow. You have to be now and be conscious of being so. In fact, even as children, time moves more slowly for us. We know that time changes based on moods. When you're happy or you're melancholic or depressed or reflective, jubilant, time seems to change, doesn't it? Oh, that was a really short weekend. Bloody, I wish it had gone on longer.